Welcome to another episode of NewyTechPeople. Today we have Mitch Brindle, Cloud Operations Manager at NIB. Welcome, Mitch.
Cheers, mate. How are you?
I am very good. This is the first podcast I've done in a while, so welcome to our first episode of 2021.
Yeah, awesome. Great to be here.
Mate, I've known you for a number of years now with your journey. Definitely one of the first guys I knew in the DevOps space. And obviously, you've grown your career. For those that don't know who you are and your journey today, can you give people a bit of an overview?
Yeah, sure. All right. So I guess been in IT now for about 10 years. I originally started in traditional IT, so servers, help desk, networking, stuff like that. Moved up from Victoria. So first gig was support tech at hospitals down there. Got a job up here at Calvary Healthcare, doing again more that support-orientated work. But then once I got a bit of more skills under me, I decided to step into the server networking infrastructure. First thing fell in love with was networking, anything Cisco at the time. That was me. I went and got some certs, etc. Then Calvary went through a transformation. So essentially, I went from a support role to an engineering role, which then essentially catapulted that exposure to that tech space. So going from networking then to service to Citrix to everything. Once Calvary was been and done, essentially I moved on to a show and rail track, which then the networking side just exploded. That's kind of where we managed our internal networking completely. We managed the actual track network as well. So that was huge exposure there. Once I had done everything that I could there, we then moved into NIB, and this is where the career just on its head. NIB was a place where they had a lot of that traditional infrastructure, but because they had a lot of development focus too, that's where the kind of shift from thinking around that tech stack to that more software stack happened. And I guess when in late 2015, so I joined NIB in 2015, they decided to go down the DevOps route. And the first iteration of that was essentially splitting off the infrastructure team with people who wanted to get more into scripting, more into programming, more into automation. And essentially, once that happened, I bit in hard on that. I thought that was fantastic. I was already into automation a bit, and because of command line with networking, the command line wasn't too spooky. So I kind of gravitated to that side, more of the infrastructure side, and then went through that for a number of years now. Been on that AWS journey, did migrationary work, but then also lift and shift from on-prem to AWS, looking at any automation between those two environments as well. And then today, after that, I did leave NIB for a proportion of time to go to Cole LSL. Fantastic time there, and that was to take an opportunity in the management space. That's where I want to take my career. And then NIB had an opportunity of a lifetime, which is essentially manage the team that I was in before. So my old peers were there still, and just working back in that tech space that I love. And obviously NIB is a great company too. So that's where I am today.
Nice, mate. You mentioned definitely the early stages of cloud, early stages of DevOps. Mate, back when you were sort of putting your foot in there to start with, I think cloud was still seen as a risk, right? It wasn't overly well adopted at that stage. How did you find that, and how have you found the acceptance of cloud now versus the early days when you guys were starting to work in there?
Yeah, okay. So I guess the early days, AWS was still, I don't want to say new in Australia, but it was essentially the same services weren't available that they are today. Cloud was always seen as this, it's easy, it's cheap, it's blah, 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 blah. But until you start to do it, you realize, it's maybe easy building a greenfield app or something like that. But in terms of moving a business system and transforming that from a tech stack to AWS, that can be quite daunting. But then you've also got the operational side of that as well, in terms of change management, any sort of business processes affected, and then that one system may talk to others. So I guess at NIB, the very early days was around that discovery piece, around, what operating model changes do we need to go to the cloud? And one of them, like I was saying earlier with my career, is that we needed to form up a DevOps team that could work cross-functionally with these dev teams and start to bring them along in our cloud journey. What some of the challenges were that I face, like me personally, was having that infrastructure background versus a development background. That's one thing that DevOps people probably wonder a bit about, is that if you have a traditional infrastructure background, how does that translate into AWS? Because a lot of things, like you hear words like infrastructure as code and codified deployments and stuff like that. It's like, well, I don't really deploy a Cisco switch, or I don't really deploy a server as such. I may deploy from a VMware template, but it's not, well, how do I use the new tooling? So I guess the one thing that probably I had to do at the very beginning was just jump in and do it. AWS is a great place, or any cloud environment really is a great place where you can spin stuff up and learn. There's a lot of material out there where you can basically experiment and play and all that sort of stuff. But I guess another hurdle we had as early adopters was then also being early adopters, you get a bit of scrutiny from regulators, and you get a bit of scrutiny from the business too, in terms of, well, why are we doing this? Why are we going to the cloud? Is it just the IT people wanting to play with some new tech, or what's the business advantage behind going to the cloud? And that's probably something that's sometimes lost in that move. And I think NIB did that quite well, where we emphasized on speed to market, and we kind of emphasized on our deployment pipelines for our internal systems, because we do the majority of everything in-house. Having that scalability during campaigns, etc. We could correlate campaigns to downtime or outages or slowness, where now we have campaigns that run, and there's been numerous examples of when a campaign has run in AWS that it was up, it handled it, the traffic, we watched the scaling events, and it was like a good news story. So in order to overcome that hurdle, we're essentially having the appropriate communications and the appropriate good news stories, like have a brag. Like, just honestly, if you do something great in infrastructure land, like IT is now, like an enabler, share that success with the business stakeholders, and then they'll be happy when you go to them the next time and go, hey, we're going to do this really cool thing. They're going to remember, oh, when you did that last cool thing, we got this out of it.
Yeah,
let's go do that cool thing.
Definitely for infrastructure, because it could, without actually telling that story, it could be very easily seen as a keep the lights on type role, right?
Oh, 100%. IT has been traditionally BAU since I've started in it. Like, it was never really such as a, like I was saying, like an enabler, where IT, typically was even in the finance sector. It wasn't really its own kind of thing. It would report to the CFO. So it was always like a cost center. It wasn't really anything that was kind of could in one way or another generate any, income, revenue, or whatever it is, even if it's indirect revenue, they've never been seen like that. But I think now with any sort of cloud computing or whatever it is, that's where that is shifting. And I think, the stronger the bond between the business and I guess IT is, or tech teams in general, you can do amazing things, and, to not, bang NIB's drum this entire thing, but look at our chatbot stuff, look at any of the wellness stuff that we're doing as well. Our cloud journey to date is all being driven essentially from business direction too. And, if NIB spins up a new initiative, or if your business spins up a new initiative, do you really want to say that technology is going to be a bit of a hurdle, or do you want to go, yeah, look, easy peasy, we just have to do X, Y, and Z, or no, we've got to buy some kit.
Yeah. Mate, you mentioned a couple of things I've just made notes on. You mentioned there's definitely a more acceptance now of cloud than the initial periods, or as you said, it could be, hey, is it just tech guys wanting to play with new tech? There's definitely an acceptance now that public cloud can be very enabling to businesses. For companies that haven't made that move yet, is there any advice that you would give them? Is it for everyone? Is there a discovery phase that people need to go through? What would be your advice? You've seen a couple of companies go through that move. I would say you've got more exposure to this space than the most, definitely Newcastle. Any advice you would give to a company that's not there yet, but considering that move right now?
Yeah, sure. I guess the one thing is don't assume you have to go. Like, the cloud, it's fantastic, but it's not for every business. It's not for every workload. It's not for every scenario. Neither is one cloud. Like, just because you've got, industry, colleagues, peers, whatever, they're in AWS does not mean that you need to, or your business needs to go to AWS. There are many other, there's two main others out there, but it's all about finding out, I guess, what your business wants to do with its infrastructure. And when I say infrastructure, like that's currently talking about the server workloads and stuff, but then also what about the systems that it currently has? It's, I guess, some people will even say, like, if you aren't in the cloud now, it's too late. I don't agree with that, because if you're not in the cloud now, then you obviously haven't had a big enough driver for it to actually do it. Or and also that the old, if it isn't broken, don't fix it. Well, you'd think, maybe someone like myself would be like, oh no, let's move fast. It's honestly, it's up to the business, but I think there are many different models. Like you could have a hybrid cloud too. You don't have to go full cloud, because when you go to a cloud environment, like a lot of time people don't remember, like, what BCP or DR or what workloads. Have you got material workloads? Have you got system of record workloads? Are you regulated? It's, there's so many different caveats where you may have to have a contingency, like an alternate provider, where, like, if you move a workload to AWS as an example, your business or your stakeholder, or even if you get a third-party assurance from another company, if you like do white labeling or anything like that, it's, you have to then answer questionnaires around your data sovereignty, integrity, backup. Yeah, there's so many different things, but in a kind of like to summarize that, essentially, I don't think it's ever too late to go to the cloud or any other sort of like hosted cloud. It doesn't have to be AWS, it doesn't have to be Azure, it could be anything. Definitely not too late, but the one thing I'd probably say is that you don't need to go to the cloud if you don't have an actual driver for it. And if it's scaling, then yes, the cloud's a fantastic place to go, because that solves it. But if you're just going to go, I'm going to go to the cloud and just move up some servers like VMs and turn them to EC2s, your price is going to be crazy. Yeah. And also, don't think the cloud's cheaper. It's cheaper if you re-architect and redesign for the cloud and use the services appropriately. But if you're just moving workloads, lift and shift, yeah, you aren't going to get a lot of the sort of cloud benefits. And then if you do that, due to the shared responsibility model, and when I say that is that essentially when you go to the cloud, the shared responsibility model shifts. So essentially, you're on the hook for security. You're on the hook for everything. Don't just think if you move workloads up there, AWS is going to protect it. Nah, you need to own a lot more than probably what some people think.
Yeah.
So I guess if people are still thinking about the cloud and stuff like that, get a good strategic partner, get an implementer. I'm not saying outsource stuff. I'm just saying get someone who's been and done it that can give you appropriate guidance on this stuff.
Good advice, mate. Good advice. Another point I just made before, you obviously came at this from a more traditional infrastructure background. Right now, if somebody's looking to get it into DevOps, it'd probably be an easier move coming from a dev background as opposed to an infrastructure background. You've done the opposite. If you had to give advice to somebody that's currently sitting in a sysadmin role, dealing with, I guess, more traditional infrastructure stack, what advice would you give? You mentioned playing with something, spinning it up yourself. Is that the advice?
Yeah, like I guess if we split the two aside for a minute in terms of like that, like infrastructure, let's just say, you're a server admin, you RDP to stuff, etc. But then if you're a dev, you're essentially writing programs or at least doing some sort of scripting or whatever it may be. The developer will probably have an easier time in that DevOps space when working cross-functionally with the developers. And just to be clear too, when I say DevOps, I'm not talking about, you can do some PowerShell and you do a bit of scripting and automation. I'm talking about the DevOps principles of there's an infrastructure or an operations engineer working with developers in their own squad. So essentially we think of it like a capability matrix. Think of it as a team. And in that team, if you look horizontally, you'll have a UX, BA, DevOps, senior dev, whatever it may be, right? Think of them as another entity in this team. So if that person there had an infrastructure background versus a dev, a dev versus infrastructure, a developer will probably have an easier time understanding the concepts of what the developers are trying to do. They'll probably understand maybe database structures a little bit more. They'll probably get that lower level coding principles and stuff like that. That's fantastic. But then where the infrastructure person will shine, it's like when they start doing their deployments to AWS, that infrastructure person is going to know about DRs, backup, etc. Because as a DevOps engineer, a senior dev, yeah, they know what a backup is, but do they really care about that backup in terms of like, is that their responsibility to make sure that backup is a backup? Because a backup's only a backup when you restore it and it works. Otherwise, it's just some files in a storage somewhere. You got to test that stuff. And that's where the DevOps engineer with the infrastructure background will excel, because they have that infrastructure ingrained in them about backups, DR. They'll be able to do like storage monitoring, alerting, they got that stuff. So I guess each of them have their pros and cons, but in order for the infrastructure person to kind of get into more of the AWS coding space, the one thing that you would really need to look at is learning some languages, getting that fundamentals from the like dev perspective, like how to do clean code and stuff like that, understanding what GitHub is or any other sort of code. Look up any sort of code deployment strategies as well is really useful. But then from the dev's perspective, then you need to then also take an account. And there's some guys in the team at the moment who have got that really heavy dev, and they've had to come in and learn more of this infrastructure stuff, because it doesn't matter how you're in the cloud, that stuff still exists. It's just called something different.
Yeah.
DNS is Route 53. Your SAN's called S3. It's everything's just a different name. It's same principles. Yeah. So I guess any advice would be for either of them is just look at the other domain. It's like, look at what a DevOps engineer does in a cross-functional environment and see what their responsibilities look like. And I guarantee you're going to find stuff that you're like, oh, I haven't really done that before. And it's just looking at the opposite domain of what you know and then starting to pick at that.
Yeah. And I think that's DevOps engineers. I remember when we started working on those type of roles together, 3, 4, 5 years ago versus now, the rise in the need for those roles have risen dramatically, and the skill sets definitely aren't there of, really seasoned DevOps engineers. So it is looking at people that come from one of those two backgrounds and then seeing who can pick up those other skills to round themselves out, right? I think companies trying to hire for somebody that's going to come in and hit the ground running, that talent pool is still very, very short.
100%. And they're, what we kind of call like a unicorn. It's like, finding someone that, I'm a dev, but I also love playing with servers in my spare time. And it's kind of very unique. And if you use terminology like full stack, like a full stack dev, go back 5 years ago, that didn't have the underlying infrastructure as code in their development pipelines. But when you kind of look at things now, it's like, that development pipeline can go down further into the actual infrastructure, depending on how it's deployed. It could be like a Lambda function. It could be Fargate. It could be some sort of containerization thing where it's handled in the deployment step. There's so many different ways you can do it. And again, it depends on how the business wants to architect their cloud environment. But when you have a cloud environment architected to get the advantages of the cloud, then that's when that stack will expand a bit. But then that's when you have that DevOps, and again, that DevOps cross-functional person that can at least facilitate when it gets a bit deeper down into the actual, like if we want to call it the OSI model, like to get old school, I guess. When you start getting down deeper, that's where that infrastructure DevOps engineer is going to shine. But then, when you have that developer DevOps engineer, they may not be able to go that one level deep, but they'll be able to still go, they'll go, instead of one deeper, they'll go one higher, so they can kind of assist with some of the code deployment stuff perhaps. But for hiring, it would be very difficult, especially in Newcastle, because I guess we don't have huge businesses on every corner of the street with multiple teams that have enough demand that can have these traditional, DevOps engineers that can work cross-functional with devs. I guess what I'm seeing at the moment, and speaking to friends in the industry and stuff like that, it's more of that they just simply want a cloud engineer, someone who's got that infrastructure background, but they know enough about the cloud environments where they can kind of do a translation between on-prem to cloud, but then also assist with any sort of movements to and from. Or what I've seen in the past too is where like an implementer is moved or built a cloud environment. Implementer's now gone because now it's back to BAU, and they want someone to come in and essentially maintain, manage, and go forward. So I guess that role in my eyes is a cloud engineering or an SRE, site reliability engineer. That's what Google terms that. But then that DevOps engineer, again, is that cross-functional resource, and finding that in Newcastle it'd be quite rare.
Yeah, super difficult, definitely.
Super rare. And I guess with the remote workforce now, it's kind of making things a little bit easier because we can kind of like look further. But then Newcastle people like to hire Newcastle people too, right? It's still, I would not want to be a recruiter.
No, we're definitely not there yet from most companies looking fully remote. And I think, as you said, I think if a company is struggling or looking to do this, having that implementer or the partner to work with to make that move initially and get everything built, have somebody that really knows their stuff come in, get it built, and then hiring somebody to manage that is definitely an easier pathway than trying to hire a unicorn to come in, build it, own it, manage it. Because I guess those people do tend to get bored as well once it gets that management stage, right? It's the sexiness, the architectural side of it's gone, and it comes BAU, right?
Oh, 100%. And that's kind of where you do get those people who would like love to do the building, is that when you do get to the BAU, it's like, well, what's next? And, IT should be that enabler where, the platform should be it should be kept up to date, but that's BAU. But in terms of like, getting it ready for the next big thing to come in from the business, it's depending on the size of your business and their rate of change, you could be sitting on your hands for 8 months.
Yeah.
12 months. And, that's okay. But again, those hungry people, the ones that are actually going to want to build the next best thing and want to develop everything.
Yep. I completely agree. Mate, you've obviously gone through that technical background and still technical yourself, but you're now managing a team. That's a question I like to ask a lot of people that get to your sort of stage in your career. I guess as technology professionals, you can sort of go one of two routes. You can continue to grow your career and stay extremely technical and not manage your team, or you can go that people management route. And they're two different routes, and it comes down to personality style and what people want to get out of their careers. Why did you decide to go down the team management, people management route?
Sure, I guess, and real quick, like I'm sure my team, if they hear this, they're going to probably like scoff at the still technical bit. But I guess for me, technology's always been like a passion for me. Like it's been a hobby. It's everything. Like I love it, always have. So I guess I was always going to be in tech, but I guess in terms of why I kind of decided to look, I've kind of hit where I was happy to like peak, I guess you could say, and we'll go into the management side of things. I think it's probably my personality where I do like the people engagement. I do like talking to people. I tend to gravitate to that side of stuff. While I do still appreciate the actual tech, I guess there are people out there that are smarter than me in that space. That's their it's their want to also get into that nitty gritty and to really deep dive, where I guess I'm kind of more interested now in the business aspect. So kind of, I guess the why, like why are we doing this X, Y, and Z, or how do we evolve a platform that's going to be ready for the next business initiative to come through. And I guess, when you're in a cloud environment, like you are so flexible in that space, and being like, I guess, a people manager or even like interfacing with the business, you then basically have that conduit from the reasons why we're doing stuff in tech. So having that conduit and me being that conduit back to our cloud team, I still feel that I'm part of the technical decisions, but I'm relaying the why. And I think when tech teams aren't just churning through Jira tickets and stuff like that, because that's hard. Like, if that's what you do, fine. But I much prefer that a personal approach, like just jump in a room or a Zoom these days and just look, what's your problem? And having that kind of, and then I can then relay that back to the leads in the team, and then we can form something up. And because arguably still a little bit technical, I love being able to sit there and whiteboard and understand what's happening. Yeah, I'm not probably going to make many decisions sometimes. So sometimes there's probably going to be arguably poor decisions made, but I still understand. I like being able to have conversations with the team. I don't want to be essentially like a leave approver.
Yeah.
So And also having an understanding of the technology being used and stuff, it's very easy then to talk to like other stakeholders in the business, higher ups and stuff like that. So if I have to do any presentations or anything like that, which is quite common at NIB, I'm quite comfortable. I can talk to anything in our AWS environment around any sort of approach. Yeah, I won't be able to tell you every single little detail of the code used, but I can talk about any initiatives or what's going on, because at the end of the day, my position is not only just a people manager, but it's like going through our roadmap. It's working with the business to get what's happening next, to make sure our platform's agile enough to support it, looking at any initiatives coming through as well to make sure we've got the bandwidth. It's kind of like a PMO / people manager / pseudo architect in some ways, because it's more, we kind of do things as a collective, not so much as there's not one person there just going, hey, that's what we're doing.
No, I think also being in that role and being, you can call yourself technical or not, but you're reasonably technical. It's, being able to have those conversations and still have the respect of the team from, hey, I've been there, done that. I still know what I'm talking about from a technical perspective. Definitely makes a difference. I think the other key point you made there is communication, right? I would say infrastructure roles, a lot of people would have had a picture of old school technology. There's an infrastructure guy that probably sits in there and doesn't communicate with the business, whereas your role obviously now, especially the higher up you go and you get in that managerial level, it's that presenting to the business, being able to communicate with the business, how we're enabling what you're trying to do, that business technology focus, the continuity there. How important do you think that communication part of your skill set has, I guess, enabled your success?
I personally think it's quite a large part. I will be the one that will ask a question and, talk in meetings. I will, not shut up. So I guess I think the communication part is important in sort of any career. But when it comes in IT or tech in general, honestly, I think it's everything. It's huge. It's because it's not only, communicating, it's a two-way street. So, you being able to communicate well doesn't necessarily mean, you can talk well, you can listen well. And I think that's really important because, your customers, if you're an internal technical team, is the business. That is your customer. If you can't listen to your customers' wants, demands, etc., then you're just going to be presenting a product or a solution that might not be fit for purpose, and you're just wasting everyone's time. So I think communication is a huge one. And that's where I believe myself and my team and my peers as well, in the wider IT team, we're very good at that. We, while it's not death by meeting, so let's not, let's just, scrap that. But, when it's needed, we'll make sure that we know exactly what we're doing. Yeah, there's some times where, a ball gets dropped, but at the same time, we're also, I guess, professional enough to admit that and go, okay, well, let's nip this in the bud now, and then we can move forward. But communication, it's huge. It's massive. Honestly, having even in the skill matrix of someone in tech these days, especially in this kind of new age world with scalable everything and infrastructure as code and all this sort of stuff, communication, I think, is up there with even your technical ability, especially because now the way that things are costed in terms of the business, cloud environments kind of cost per day, etc. Being able to communicate fluctuations, being able to talk to them and then predict costing, because again, it's not like a flat fee where you go, okay, we're doing a hardware refresh, guys. It's we're at year 4 or 5 of our maintenance. There's a couple of mil, just go and put in some new blades. That doesn't work like that anymore. No. So you need to be able to listen to the business coming through with initiatives and demand, so that way you can then communicate back, that looks like we're going to be going up in price, and it's kind of, communication is huge. It's massive.
Yeah, I think it's a rising skill, and it's definitely an absolute necessity these days. It's not, you can't get away with it without it, I guess, now in technology. There's definitely that mix between technology and business where communication is absolutely paramount. On that note, then, you're obviously building a team, managing a team these days. What are some of the key skills you look for in the people that you're looking for in building out your cloud team?
Yeah, look, I guess our team's doubled in size over the past 2 years, I believe now. And I guess when I've been hiring, I don't really look for a specific skill set. It's kind of more of the individual. Having a fundamental knowledge on stuff is fantastic, but essentially that's not everything. The one thing that we do at NIB and specifically myself is we'll hire for that cultural side of things, but also that straight drive. Let's be real. People work to live, right? You want, someone who's going to be, putting in what they essentially can to either learn the skills, or they've got the passion to learn the skills to be able to deliver whatever the business wants. So I guess if I had to name some skills, obviously AWS, fantastic, or any cloud stuff. A development background is good too, but infrastructure is good too. The last couple of hires was a mixed bag. We had some that was a dev, some that was infrastructure dev. One guy that hadn't even seen AWS really before. Now he's running the show. So it's like, it's more around when we go through the recruitment process and we sort of ask our questions, etc., is how it gets answered. And especially, it's always interesting is like when you kind of, start that whole process and you start talking to, engineers that are wanting to join, etc. It's the ones that when they start talking about their previous workplace, wherever it may be, or even a problem at home, like some have said, oh, look, I'm doing stuff at home and I'm getting agitated. It's the ones that when you see they've got a problem, they are very, animated on how to fix it. And you see them, they start to adjust themselves in their chair because you can tell they're getting a bit passionate and worked up over it. So when you kind of start to reading the body language on like, you really, like that process that you're talking about that you aren't allowed to fix at your workplace currently or whatever it may be, you not only know how to fix it, but it bothers you that it's not fixed. So just knowing that essentially tells me it's like, well, you're probably going to do something about that then, or you're going to want to do something about it. You're not just going to go, oh, that's the way it is, or look, just another day. It's that, you want to, this is cringy as, but, be the change you want to be and all that sort of stuff, but you want to legit make it change. And that's where NIB, like, we want people like that, straight up. It is 100%, we're not going to give you a Jira board full of tickets to do. They may look like that, but we've got projects on. But if you see something that you don't like or you're not happy with, change it.
Yeah, like you're encouraged to actually go about.
You are encouraged to spit the pill and come and tell me, hey, I don't think this is the best way to do it. I've done blah, blah, blah. Here's the thing. Look, I think this is the best way to do it. Let's do it. Yeah. As simple as that. And there's numerous examples of that going through NIB, and I think that's why NIB, can retain these like very passionate, skilled, hungry people because we give that opportunity.
Yeah, mate, problem solving is probably one of the biggest parts you've mentioned there, right? Somebody that actually does get agitated by a problem and will find a way to fix it. Yeah. I think that's something in technology as a whole. I think problem solving, people that are actually passionate about it. Because as you said, like technology changes so quickly, whether they've got experience with the current tech stack or not, it's going to continue to evolve anyway. So they're going to have to learn within the next 3, 6, 12 months anyway. So them not having every box ticked from a tech stack perspective on day one, it's not the biggest issue. It's have you shown, an aptitude to learn in the past, like or solve a problem. I think that they're the sort of things that I know that have worked in your teams in the past.
Yeah, just honest, that problem solving is good. Probably the one thing with problem solving, with problem solving, I guess the one thing that we also I don't expect really is you don't need to solve it on your own either. Like, I guess don't forget like what we're doing is some stuff may be bleeding edge. Nothing's like, mostly cutting edge. So there's probably someone in the business, someone around that might be able to help you. Yeah. So I guess, with the problem solving, it's like a fantastic skill to have, and naturally enough, like you need it. But I guess it's also being able to admit when you're defeated. It's when that problem has defeated you that you now as a person can kind of admit defeat. Because some people tend to not really, they don't want to go, oh, I can't do this, I need help. And then if you're asking in a public forum, they may not want to look silly. So that's kind of a thing as well. So it's being able to, again, solve problems but then realize you can't solve it because you just can't find the resources or whatever it may be. Nothing against your technical or whatever ability that you're struggling with at the moment to like solve this, but then able to ask for help from your peers or whatever it may be. So that's another really big one.
Nice, man. That's enough about your team, I guess, to start with. But individually, from your career perspective, I know you've presented remotely at the AWS or the remote AWS conference recently. Mate, how did that come about? Because that's something that not everyone gets into from a career perspective. I know it's something that there's quite a few people from NIB that have done that in the past. It seems like it's definitely encouraged there. But why did you do that?
So a bit of background then. So AWS has an alliance program. So essentially, AWS goes out to the enterprise customers and go, hey, would you like to put any people forward to represent your company with AWS and like companies as well? So myself and Tony Brown, we got nominated, accepted. So last year, we were part of the 2020 AWS Cloud Dev Alliance of Australia Pacific. So we got to present basically NIB, AWS, nutshell, I guess, plus some slick stuff Tony's been working on. Naturally enough, anyone that knows Tony Brown, you'd assume he's working on some pretty slick stuff. So we presented in front of basically all the other members of the Alliance. We got really good feedback from it, because the one thing about our presentation that I guess caught a lot of attention was that typically in these things, you'll hear about the good stuff of AWS. You'll hear about, we've done this serverless thing and it's been fantastic and blah, blah, blah. The one thing that NIB's, currently doing at the moment, obviously we're on our cloud journey. We're looking at moving everything out of data centers, all that stuff, right? But the one thing that our presentation touched on, and it was like a tag team approach where we started off talking about, how do you move like legacy to the cloud? So we're talking about things that aren't cloud native and stuff like that. And then we moved all the way through to Tony's whiz-bang serverless architecture, right? Because a lot of companies, and when you were talking earlier around, when's the right time to go to the cloud, there are still companies out there moving to the cloud, but they've got legacy workloads that are pretty, honestly, lack of a better word, pretty scuffed in terms of architecture, because they're like an old monolith style thing where they've got the database on it. It could be any data, you know what I mean? It's like a single tiered instance. It's not scalable, it's disgusting, and it can't go in a cloud natively, right? So we're looking at doing how does that work in cloud? But then because these other companies, they're in the same stage, there's a lot of requests for Tony Brett and I to do the talk again, but to the Asian community as well. So we did the presentation again to another AWS like Dev Cloud Alliance team, another part of the world. Which was fantastic. Like, it was really good because like these, I guess, are AWS enterprise partners, so they're quite in bed with AWS as well. But you can do things so many different ways. So when you're in these communities, you can hear these talk, all different topics and stuff like that. So you can get some really good insight into AWS. So that's really, really good. And NIB is fantastic with that. They're very willing to enable someone to not so much promote their personal brand, but able to talk on NIB's behalf around, look, this is the tech we're doing, this is the really cool stuff that we're doing, but then also giving you that platform to present and get that own personal skills as well, so that you can further your own career, and I think as a company that's fantastic, and it's a testament to them to show that it's somewhat indirect development of their staff, but it's more giving the staff that I guess who want to do that and have that opportunity to do it, that platform. So it's, I think it's fantastic. So like Robbie Williams and I, he's the cybersecurity manager at NIB. We did a talk as well with Sumo Logic and CrowdStrike. I've got another one coming up with Sumo Logic and PagerDuty. And it's just really good also talking about the NIB story, just because like the majority of us now have been there since day one of our cloud project. It's kind of like sharing what we've done and then realizing that, what we've done is like, it's pretty slick. Like it's not many people out there have either moved as quick or done things as wild as we have too, which is great. But Yeah, so the talks just come about just, having that strong vendor relationship too. So while I was talking earlier around having strategic partners from that tech space, awesome. Again, you can use them for what they're used for, but there's opportunities like this that come up where you can either boost your company's personal brand because other people see it and they can get either confidence of, if they're using it, the vendor. So you can get like different arrangements and stuff. So just, there's lots of different opportunities working with strategic partners than just purely tech. And I think that's something that, some people may not realize, that strategic partner can tee you up with another customer who's going through a similar thing, have a bit of a forum, a bit of a chat.
Yeah.
And, they might be able to help you or you could help them. And then all of a sudden you've got another networking, so you just, think of it as not a vendor, but a strategic partner. And then that strategic side of things isn't just the tools or the product. It can be more.
Yeah, it can open some doors for you, right? And as you said, being able to talk with other companies that are doing the similar things to you, to your point earlier about problem solving, you don't have to have all the answers yourself, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And I think the other thing I know you mentioned to me before, as you said, most talks at conferences and things it's all the bells and whistles and none of the dirt behind the scenes. And I know you've talked about how you attacked it a little differently, and we're happy to do, the warts and all story about, hey, this didn't always go right. This, we had these issues and this is how we went about it. And I think people find that quite refreshing. Mate, we all make mistakes. You've mentioned it before. We all make mistakes. We all face challenges we don't know how to do. And it's refreshing to actually hear of people that had success in the long run, but it wasn't always smooth sailing.
Oh, correct. And that's probably the one thing that when I do go to conferences and I watch or do talks and whatever it is, the one common theme is it's always some good news thing. It's always you're doing some new function. I'm like, yeah, but look, from someone who's been on the ground and still quite on the ground in the weeds in terms of from that, the technical problems of the business. I know you've got some little sneaky application sitting out the back there that's not really in the cloud yet, but kind of is. That's something that most businesses have if they've been around for a while. That's the stuff that personally, I find you solving that's much harder and to me more impressive than deploying a greenfield app to AWS using a new service that's a couple of lines of code and away you go. You got a website or a deployment pipeline. It's you move the stuff that you don't talk about. That's impressive. And I guess that's kind of the part where NIB's up to now is we're moving the stuff that it's not easy to move to the cloud, but to be able to move those workloads to the cloud, but get the benefit of the cloud. And then that's a key thing here, right? I'm not talking about a lift and shift as such, even though for the most part it can be, but it's leveraging the appropriate cloud services so you have a reduction in cost, or you have the correct governance around cost management, or you have the correct governance around DR and BCP. And when I do my talks and the ones I've done at AWS and Sumo and stuff, the one thing I really like to really do is emphasize these things aren't perfect. Well, nothing's perfect, especially if your company's been around for 10, 20, 30 years. They've gone from physical, my first job in a real at Calvary was P2Ving. Probably a lot of kids in the early start of IT now don't know what physical to virtualization means. We had physical servers. We used VM conversion tool to put it as a virtual VM. It's, you've probably got servers that have been P2V'd in VMware, and now you're doing a VMDK to EC2 conversion. Solve that.
Yeah.
Tell me how you've solved that, but enabled to keep the SLAs of the business, RTOs, RPOs, all that sort of jazz. That to me is impressive. Not I've just built a Lambda that's deployed and our website's a few milliseconds quicker now.
Yeah.
But it's still, not to diminish that's pretty cool. But from that, again, that infrastructure mind of mine, in terms of that's my background, right? Doing a cloud migration, that's moving the stuff that is in the back server room.
Yeah. Mate, you're obviously doing some pretty cool stuff. You're getting to speak at, conferences with international companies there. And you're doing all this from a role in Newcastle. You're still based in Newcastle. I know you're passionate about staying around. Mate, why Newcastle for you? And what's kept you in Newcastle?
it's just an awesome place. So I was born here, but moved around heaps when I was younger. So I spent most of the time in Victoria. After year 12, straight back up here. Look, Newcastle is fantastic. Like, yeah, it might not have all the big name businesses, but it's got the ones that, you know, are doing the cool stuff too. So I guess I haven't really had a need to go anywhere else. With the new remote workforce, etc., that does open up avenues and opportunities, but I'll be real, I'm not even looking at it. Newcastle is just a fantastic place. It's like, you know, everything is close. It's like you got the beach, you got the lake, you got the, you know, bushland, you got everything here. It's in terms of even it's not that busy yet. It does sometimes, but it's, you know, you got half an hour vineyards, depending on where you live, half an hour away, you can kind of get to so many different areas. So I guess in terms of, what kept me here is just the area.
Yeah.
But again, like where I currently work, I haven't had any real need to go anywhere else. I'm, you know, from a career progression point of view.
Yeah, you've been provided opportunities.
Ticking the boxes as I go. So yeah.
On the flip side of that, what's the biggest challenge for us? Yeah, I guess attracting talent to Newcastle or keeping good talent in Newcastle?
Well, probably depending on the business, it would be the rate of change in the business. I think a lot of talented people are people that probably don't want to do a lot of BAU. Yeah, they may do it if they have to or whatever, but I feel the one thing that keeps these really passionate, strong people is the rate of change in your business to be able to give them new things to challenge. Autonomy, I think, is a big one too. And I think Newcastle, from the businesses that I've dealt with, are quite good at autonomy. But yeah, I guess like we spoke earlier about the unicorns as well, that is difficult to find in Newcastle. You know, obviously if one comes along, you keep, retain, you do whatever you sort of can to make sure that they're happy. Honestly, that's probably about it. It's that rate of change is to keep people here because, you know, they know, in 6 months, there's going to be a new thing that I can do. So I guess that's kind of the business side of thing.
Yeah, nice.
But then it's also that person having the autonomy to be able to show the business, hey, did you know about this?
Yeah.
As well. So
agreed, man. Mate, from a productivity perspective, is there a tool you use or any software you use on a daily basis, you know, help you manage your day, your team?
Not particularly. Like I have my Apple OneNotes, Outlook. My team know how much I love Outlook and quite versed at it. I hope some watch this because, yeah, they will not like that. And, yeah, honestly, I just try to just do any notes, reminders. My phone, I kind of put as much as in my calendar I can in terms of work stuff, Jira through work, but I've got a personal Trello board, which I do kind of put work stuff in that too, just to make sure that everything's sweet. Yeah, I don't really have anything fancy or anything like that. Pretty old school when it comes to that.
Yeah. I think, you know, between the suite you're using, it probably ticks most of the boxes, right?
Yeah, it's fine. The only real stuff, just the calendar is probably the biggest one. I like to think that I'm quite good in terms of remembering to do stuff myself, but just really Apple knows. I'll kind of jot down or any reminders if it's something that's a priority or important, just a reminder. But in terms of that, I don't really, you know, at NRB as well, a lot of stuff's not so much reported back. So I tend to just put some of my own personal stuff in. I've got my own Jira board as well. I kind of do my management stuff in there. And that's really about it. And that helps me keep track.
On that note, mate, yeah, I know you're not a big, you know, podcast reading books perspective. That's not how you go about your education, mate. How do you you know, keep up to date?
Honestly, it's stuff like this. It's talking to communities. It's this understanding what other businesses and what other people are at the same level-ish of their organization are doing. Obviously, being in the AWS Dev Cloud Alliance, that's fantastic. We're in a Slack together, so ask questions in there a lot. Talk to other colleagues as well, or other people in that community that are at similar organizations as NRB, so ones that are in, you know, APRA regulated stuff, so that way we can talk around, well, in your cloud movement, you know, did you get kickback from this, or, you know, or blah blah blah, right? You know, that kind of stuff. But with the educational point, I tend to really talk to probably people that are usually at NIB because it's the easy point, but those probably senior guys. It's kind of like making connections with the senior leadership management, kind of like that mentoring kind of approach, not official mentoring, right? But, getting guidance and stuff, or, hey, I'm doing this thing, and, just, if it's kind of down their path versus, another head of or something like that, I'll kind of ask them for a bit of guidance and, hey, can you proofread this thing, or can you give me support? Which at NIB, that is something that is amazing. So yeah, it's really just, I kind of like to have a knock myself.
No, mate, I really like that. I think there are some people, there's a lot of people, right? Everyone goes about education in different ways, formal education, and then courses, short courses, then podcasts, books, yada, yada, yada. But mate, the fact that you've gone about it from unofficial mentoring and also communities, like building communities, building those networks and relationships, I really like that. I think it's a different approach to most people, or people maybe have that as a minute part of their education, or maybe don't focus on the educational benefit of a network or building a network or community. But I really like that. I think it's a good point that people could really take a lot from.
100%. It's massive because, you're not talking theoreticals.
Yeah.
You're talking to people that have either been and done or doing. And we're in tech. This, half the stuff's been done before. It's like, don't beat yourself up trying to solo something. Like, if you need any, and I'm not talking from like a technical perspective here, but from like a management perspective, there's so much knowledge out there from these people. And even if you look from like at a senior in terms of age, like, they've been around longer, they've probably seen more things, they've been through more different changes, they've been through so much. It's like really look around, because also when you do read as well, I find that you can get like sometimes the context isn't there in terms of, well, what organization do you work for? But if you're looking for some sort of guidance here and now, talking to someone in your organization or in a similar organization to you, also, they can give you guidance around, what to do in this current situation. So therefore, it's not so much theoretical, it's more in the now.
Hey, on that note then, finishing up, for people that are out there and don't want to reinvent the wheel themselves, or want to sort of ask you for some advice, they might be looking at a cloud journey or looking at something you've mentioned today, what's the easiest way for people to get in contact with you?
LinkedIn, really. I'm not a huge social media guy or anything like that. So honestly, LinkedIn, search me. You'll see it. Don't have the beard in the photo, so might look a bit older and a little bit thinner, but you can thank over for that. But no, look, but LinkedIn's fine. Just got my email, stuff on that. So
no worries, man. Thanks for coming in today.
No problem. Awesome.